Welcome to Female Voices, Life and Loss with your hosts, Teresa Reiniger and Wayna Berry.
Welcome back to Female Voices, Life and Loss. I'm Teresa.
And I'm Wayna.
Join us for each episode as we explore lived stories, offer gentle insight, and hold space for what it means to navigate life after loss. This is a space for women carrying grief, loss, and life transitions, especially the ones held quietly while still showing up for everyday life. This podcast offers language for what you are feeling and guidance for who you are becoming. And now your hosts, Teresa Reiniger and Wayna Berry.
Hello, and welcome back to Female Voices, Life and Loss. I'm Teresa Reiniger. Last episode, I talked about celebrating my 6 years of podcasting and opening really the door to season 3 that we're in now. And as I thought about what to talk about next, I kept coming back to one question. Why do stories matter so much? Because if I'm honest, this podcast has never really been about microphones, our downloads, our numbers. It's always been about the stories. Stories have a way of reaching places advice never can. Sometimes one sentence from someone else's experience gives language to something we've carried for years. And today, I want to talk about why stories heal, why we connect so much through stories. There's something powerful that happens when someone says, "Me too." Suddenly, you're not the only one. Stories help us realize I'm not failing, I'm not broken, because none of us are, and I'm not alone. And I've seen this really over and over. Women who arrive feeling isolated, leaving feeling totally understood. That kind of gets me a little emotional, but not because someone fixed them, because like I said, we're not broken, but because someone understood them. As I was preparing really for this episode, I reflected on 6 years of podcasting, hundreds of episodes. And I started thinking about the stories that have stayed with me, which are all of them, but talking about mothers carrying their loss of a child, the loss of identity, shifts women have in rediscovering purposes and caregiving and rebuilding after divorce. And honestly, there are so many. And the one that immediately came to mind when I was thinking about this is really episode 3. It was a long time ago, almost 6 years ago. And that one was with my oldest daughter. That conversation was incredibly heartfelt and emotional for both of us. By the time we recorded that episode, she had already walked through so much of her infertility journey. She had spent years advocating for herself, searching for answers, pushing for solutions, continuing to hope and continuing to move forward even when things didn't go according to plan. And as I think about that conversation now, not just with her, but with really both of my daughters, I feel so much pride. I am so proud to have watched them navigate infertility, grief, disappointment, hope, and eventually motherhood. Has reminded me again that resilience doesn't always look loud. Sometimes resilience looks like showing up for another appointment, trying one more time, asking one more question, holding hope and heartbreak at the same time. And all of my daughters have become such beautiful women and mothers through their own unique journeys, as having really all of the female guests that I've talked to through the years. There's such resilience in women. Those conversations every single one changed me. And in many ways, they have shaped this podcast. Over the years, I've also found myself reflecting often on grief itself, how we experience it, how communities support people who are grieving. And one of the unexpected gifts of podcasting has been hearing stories from guests, really outside of the US and in the US, but especially those outside of the US in Canada, the UK. And what struck me was this: grief itself feels universal. The ache, the love, the longing, the identity shifts, those feel deeply human, no matter where someone lives. But the way communities respond to grief can look very different. How people gather, how they talk about loss, the support systems available, the permission people feel to really grieve. And listening to those conversations made me realize there are things we can do differently and do better in the US. Those episodes created something really in me, a desire to help shift conversations locally and maybe in small ways contribute to changing how we support people experiencing grief in our communities and across the US. And then there's another thing that has stayed with me: the listeners. Over the years, I cannot tell you how many messages I received from women who have listened to an episode and said, I felt like she was telling my story. Or, can I connect with her? Can you connect me? Because I can totally relate to what she was sharing. Or I finally feel understood. Some wanted to ask questions. Some wanted support. Some simply wanted someone else who truly understood. And what I love is that sometimes those connections happen both ways, which was beautiful. Guests realizing they weren't alone, listeners realizing they weren't alone. And suddenly this became more than a podcast. It became a community. Another thing that I never expected was how much I would learn. When I first started the podcast around infertility and pregnancy loss, I thought I understood infertility. I was experiencing that with my daughters and the grief that went along with it. And then I quickly realized I knew a very small piece of it. But through conversation with guests, I learned more about IUIs, IVF, ITSIs, embryo adoption, surrogacy, just adoption, all of the things. I became so much more educated and was able to understand more. So many different paths women walk towards motherhood. And each story expanded my understanding and deepened my compassion for them. Some of my favorite episodes have been the ones closest to home as I was thinking about this. The episode with my two granddaughters was wonderful, just heartfelt. And then the episode with my husband, who has been with me and my biggest supporter, not only in the podcast journey, where he was always my editor, my proofreader for show notes and everything, but in helping me build and supporting me in living after grief and supporting me through my own grief journey. And those conversations remind me of something I've come to believe over the last 6 years. Stories don't just help listeners. Stories change the people also telling the story. And stories change the people listening. That's why that matters. That's why the podcast matters. That's why sharing stories matters so much. I have also loved having podcast guests that are part of nonprofits. I've had multiples of those. They have shared their stories behind their organizations and the resources they provide to support others. And so if you have heard or know me at all, you know I have a heart for nonprofits. and I'm always supporting them in many ways. I do a lot of support groups with them. Something I've learned though is healing often doesn't happen because someone gives us answers. It happens because someone helps us feel safe enough, really, to ask better questions, to understand. So, Female Voices was created because so many women are carrying invisible things, and stories create permission, language, connection, hope. Not hope that says, move on, but hope that says, you can carry this differently. If this podcast has ever made you feel seen, understood, less alone, I want to invite you into something deeper. Join the community on social media. But also, I've created a free resource for you, or maybe that person in your life that could use additional support. And that free resource is called Life After Loss, a gentle guide for women finding their way forward. Not because you or anyone else needs fixing, but because sometimes we just need additional support. So you can download that. We'll make sure it's in the show notes. It'll be on my website where you can find it. And we'll make sure that we put that too on Female Voices Facebook page and other socials so that you can find it. But join the community, stay connected. And I want to leave you with one question. What story has changed your life? Thanks for joining me, and I will see you again next week.
Thanks for listening to Female Voices Life and Loss. If this episode resonated with you, helped you feel seen, or gave language to something you've been carrying, we invite you to share it with someone who may need it. Be sure to follow the show so you don't miss future episodes and the powerful voices still to come.